This story is about a man named Jacob and his wife, Clara. From the outside, they seemed like the perfect couple. Ambitious, loving, and committed. But as they say, not everything is as it seems. Jacob, a marketing consultant in his early 30s, lived a structured yet fulfilling life. With his charming demeanor and keen sense of humor, he was the kind of guy everyone wanted to be friends with. Clara, on the other hand, was a strikingly intelligent project manager with a vibrant personality. Together, they had built what appeared to be an unshakable partnership. Their small but cozy home in the heart of Maplewood, a serene suburban town, was a testament to their shared dream of building a future together. But cracks began to form in their seemingly perfect marriage. Over the past few months, Jacob had noticed subtle but unmistakable changes in Clara. She had become unusually distant, her phone always clutched tightly in her hand, her laughter increasingly rare. It wasn't like her to cancel their Friday movie nights or excuse herself for mysterious work calls during dinner. One evening, Clara came home beaming with excitement, waving a letter in her hand. "Jacob, you won't believe it," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I've been selected to lead a groundbreaking project overseas. It's a huge opportunity for my career, but it means I'll have to be away for a month." Jacob's heart sank, though he forced a supportive smile. "A month? That's a long time, Clara. Where's the project?" "Barcelona," she replied, her voice filled with awe. "Can you imagine? It's like a dream come true." Jacob tried to share her excitement, but an uneasy feeling gnawed at him. "Barcelona sounds incredible," he said, masking his doubts. "But are you sure you're ready for such a big leap? We've never been apart for that long." Clara shrugged off his concerns with a practiced ease. "Jacob, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I can't let it slip through my fingers. Besides, it's just a month. You'll hardly notice I'm gone." As Clara meticulously planned her trip, Jacob couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was off. Her enthusiasm felt oddly rehearsed, and her reassurances seemed almost too perfect. But he pushed those thoughts aside, convincing himself that he was overthinking. As the day of Clara's departure approached, Jacob stood by the doorway watching her pack. Little did he know, the seemingly ordinary trip she was about to embark on would unravel secrets that would change his life forever. "So what do you think Clara's hiding? Stick around. You won't believe what happens next." As Clara's departure date loomed closer, Jacob couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease gnawing at him. He tried to chalk it up to nerves. After all, they'd never been apart for so long. But something about Clara's behavior didn't sit right. Her excitement about the trip was palpable, yet oddly detached. She'd spent hours meticulously planning every detail, from her wardrobe to her itinerary, as if she were heading off to more than just a business trip. Jacob had always admired Clara's organization, but this felt different. She was hyper-focused, brushing off his casual questions with vague answers. When he asked about her schedule, she'd wave it off. "Oh, just meetings and networking," she'd say, avoiding his eyes as she zipped up her suitcase. The night before her flight, Clara was glued to her phone, her fingers dancing across the screen. When Jacob asked who she was texting, she smiled and said, "Just my team, finalizing a few things," but when he glanced over, she quickly tilted the phone away, locking the screen. Jacob's unease grew heavier, though he didn't voice his concerns. Instead, he watched as she meticulously packed, folding clothes with precision and tucking away little items he didn't recognize. Among them was a sleek black dress, far more elegant than anything she'd normally wear for work. "Wow, that's fancy," Jacob said, trying to keep his tone light. Clara glanced at the dress and smiled. "You never know when you might need to make an impression." The next day, Jacob dropped Clara off at the airport, forcing a smile as he kissed her goodbye. "Have a safe flight," he said, trying to believe everything was fine. But just days later, Jacob's suspicions deepened. While grocery shopping, he ran into Sam, an old friend from high school. As they caught up, Sam casually mentioned something that sent a chill down Jacob's spine. "Hey, by the way, I thought I saw Clara downtown last week," Sam said, frowning slightly. "She was with someone Didn't look like a work thing. Jacob froze. Downtown? Are you sure? She's been preparing for her trip. Pretty sure, Sam replied. Maybe I was mistaken, but it looked like her. As Sam walked away, Jacob's mind raced. If Clara had been downtown instead of at work, what else was she hiding? The knot in his stomach tightened. Something was definitely wrong. Jacob's unease transformed into restless curiosity. Sam's comment about seeing Clara downtown replayed in his mind, refusing to let him rest. It gnawed at him, making every text from Clara feel like a lie wrapped in pleasantries. He needed to know the truth, no matter how painful. One late evening, sitting alone in their dimly lit living room, Jacob decided he couldn't ignore his instincts any longer. He picked up Clara's old tablet, which she'd stopped using months ago but hadn't bothered to log out of her accounts. As he powered it on, his heart pounded in his chest, guilt and desperation warring within him. Scrolling through her emails, he initially found nothing unusual. Work updates, subscription notices, and the like. But then, buried in a folder labeled personal, he found something that made his stomach drop. A thread of messages exchanged with someone named Ethan. Jacob's eyes scanned the screen, his disbelief mounting with every word. The emails started innocently enough, work discussions and casual banter, but soon shifted into something much deeper. Flirty comments turned into outright confessions of affection. Ethan mentioned how excited he was for their upcoming escape and how he couldn't wait to see her in Barcelona. Jacob's hands trembled as he clicked through the messages. Clara hadn't gone to Barcelona for a business trip. She had planned a romantic getaway with Ethan. Her words were filled with passion and excitement, describing the places they'd visit and even suggesting they take photos to remember forever. Desperate for confirmation, Jacob opened her photo gallery synced to the tablet. There they were, pictures of Clara and Ethan, laughing together in cozy cafes, walking along picturesque streets, and even lounging poolside. Ethan's arm was draped around Clara in nearly every photo, their smiles intimate and carefree. Jacob's chest tightened, a wave of heartbreak washing over him. He felt the sting of betrayal like a dagger to the heart. How could Clara do this to him, after everything they'd built together? But heartbreak soon gave way to anger. Jacob clenched his fists, his mind racing. He couldn't let this slide. He needed answers, and he needed a plan. Clara had lied to him, betrayed him, and now she was going to face the consequences. Fueled by raw emotion, Jacob resolved to take back control of his life, starting with confronting the truth head-on. The discovery of Clara's betrayal left Jacob shattered but resolute. He spent the night pacing his living room, unable to sleep as a storm of emotions swirled within him. The Clara he thought he knew, the woman who shared his dreams and plans for the future, had been replaced by a stranger. But Jacob wasn't about to let the betrayal define him. If Clara thought she could walk all over him, she was sorely mistaken. The next morning, Jacob made a decision. He needed professional advice, someone who could help him navigate the legal and financial chaos that lay ahead. After a quick online search, he scheduled a meeting with Marcus Hall, a highly regarded divorce attorney in the area. Walking into Marcus's office, Jacob felt a mix of nerves and anger. The attorney, a composed man in his early 40s with a sharp suit and a sharper mind, greeted him warmly. "Jacob, I understand this is a difficult time," Marcus began, gesturing for him to take a seat. "Tell me everything." Jacob recounted the past week, the suspicious remarks, the damning emails, and the photos that confirmed Clara's betrayal. As he spoke, Marcus listened intently, occasionally jotting down notes. When Jacob finished, Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "You're in a strong position, Jacob," Marcus said, "but you need to act swiftly. First and foremost, we need to protect your financial interests. Do you and Clara share any joint accounts?" Jacob nodded. "Yes, we've been saving for a house. There's a significant amount in there." Marcus's eyes sharpened. "Then here's what we'll do. We'll move those funds into an account solely in your name. Legally, this is justified given the evidence of her infidelity. Once the money is secure, we'll file for divorce. This will minimize her leverage and ensure she can't claim more than she deserves." The plan was bold, and Jacob felt a twinge of guilt. But the thought of Clara spending their hard-earned savings on her affair enraged him. "Let's do it," he said firmly. Over the next several days, Jacob followed Marcus's guidance to the letter. He discreetly transferred the funds into a new account and began gathering documentation: bank statements, emails, and the incriminating photos. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of his dignity, a small victory in the face of betrayal. Late one night, as Jacob sorted through papers at his dining table, he paused to reflect on how his life had unraveled so quickly. He thought about the nights spent dreaming of a future with Clara, of building a family and a home. Those dreams now felt like lies, hollow promises shattered by her deceit. But amidst the heartbreak, Jacob found a spark of determination. "I won't let her ruin me," he whispered to himself. "She made her choices, and now she'll face the consequences." As the legal preparations continued, Jacob began to take control in other areas of his life. He confided in close friends, who rallied around him with support and encouragement. He picked up old hobbies, using them as a distraction and a way to reconnect with himself. Slowly but surely, he started to feel like his old self again, or perhaps a stronger, wiser version of himself. By the time Marcus handed him the finalized divorce papers, Jacob felt ready. He had secured their savings, built his case, and prepared himself emotionally for what lay ahead. Clara had underestimated him, but Jacob was determined to show her, and himself, that he was far from defeated. Now, all that remained was waiting for Clara's return. And when that day came, Jacob would be ready to deliver the reckoning she never saw coming. The day Clara returned was crisp and bright, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions brewing in Jacob's mind. As the cab pulled into the driveway, she stepped out, her luggage in tow. Clara looked radiant, her skin slightly tanned, and her demeanor more relaxed than Jacob had seen in months. She adjusted her sunglasses, smiling as she took in the familiar sight of their house. But as she approached the door, something felt off. A car she didn't recognize was parked in the driveway. A modest sedan with a child's skateboard resting against its rear tire. She frowned but brushed it off. Maybe Jacob had invited a friend over to keep him company while she was away. Clara reached for her keys, but before she could unlock the door, it swung open. Standing in the doorway was a woman in her late 30s, holding a coffee mug, her expression calm but firm. Beside her stood a teenage boy, idly spinning a wheel on his skateboard. "Can I help you?" Clara asked, her voice uncertain. The woman smiled faintly. "You must be Clara. I'm Ava, and this is my son, Dylan. Jacob said you'd be stopping by to collect your things." Clara blinked, her grip on her suitcase tightening. "My things? What are you talking about? This is my house." Ava's smile softened with a tinge of pity. "Oh, I'm sorry. Jacob ended the lease last week. We moved in a few days ago." She stepped aside, gesturing toward the hallway where boxes labeled Clara were neatly stacked. Clara's stomach sank. Her mind raced to make sense of what she was hearing. "There must be some mistake," she stammered, her voice shaky. "Jacob wouldn't. He couldn't." Ava raised an eyebrow, sipping her coffee. "I think it's best if you speak with him directly. Everything you need is in the garage." Clara's heart pounded as she fumbled for her phone and dialed Jacob's number. He picked up on the third ring, his tone calm and measured. "Clara," he said simply. "Jacob." She burst out, tears already forming in her eyes. "What is going on? There's a stranger in our house, telling me you ended the lease. What is this?" Jacob's voice remained cold, unyielding. "It's exactly what it looks like. I thought it was time for a fresh start." "A fresh start?" Clara's voice cracked. "You can't just do this. We need to talk about this like adults." "We do," Jacob replied. "That's why I left the divorce papers in your car. They're in a folder on the passenger seat. Everything you need is in there." "Divorce papers?" Clara choked out, her mind reeling. "Jacob, I've seen the photos, Clara." He cut her off, his tone sharper now. "I know about Ethan. I know about Barcelona, or should I say Miami. And I know how you've been lying to me for months." There was silence on the line, save for Clara's shallow breathing. Her legs felt weak, and she gripped the side of her car for support. "Jacob, it's not what you think," she began, desperation creeping into her voice. "I can explain." "Don't bother," Jacob said firmly. "I've already moved on. The house is no longer ours. The money's secure and the divorce papers are ready. There's nothing left to talk about." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Clara tried calling back, but the number was blocked. Panic surged through her as she looked back at Ava, who watched her with quiet sympathy. Clara stumbled toward the garage, her vision blurred by tears. Inside, she found a few neatly packed boxes containing her belongings. On the passenger seat of her car was the folder Jacob had mentioned, the words, "divorce papers," printed boldly across the front. Opening the folder, Clara's hands trembled as she skimmed through the documents. Everything was meticulously prepared. Jacob had outmaneuvered her at every turn. For a moment, she stood frozen in the garage, staring at the papers, her mind racing between denial, anger, and desperation. How had it come to this? She had thought she was in control, but Jacob had turned the tables on her completely. As Clara drove away, her belongings packed into her car, she couldn't shake the hollow realization that the life she'd built on lies had crumbled, leaving her with nothing but regret. Meanwhile, Jacob watched her car disappear from a window in a nearby cafe, his heart heavy but resolute. This was the end of one chapter, and the beginning of a new one. Clara's life began unraveling the moment she drove away from the house that was no longer hers. The neatly packed boxes in the back of her car seemed like the only semblance of order left in her world. The betrayal she thought she could conceal had not only been exposed but meticulously dismantled by Jacob. And now, she was left to face the wreckage of her decisions. The first blow came when she attempted to reach out to her closest friends for support. Clara had always been the type to surround herself with a carefully curated social circle, friends who admired her ambition and charisma. But word of her affair spread quickly, especially after Jacob had shared evidence of her actions with a few mutual acquaintances. Calls and texts that Clara hoped would bring comfort were met with cold indifference or terse responses. "I can't believe you'd do that to Jacob," one friend wrote, summing up the sentiments of many. Even Clara's family, who had once been her biggest supporters, expressed their disappointment. Her younger sister, who had always looked up to her, refused to answer her calls. "You were my role model," she finally texted. "I don't even know who you are anymore." The shame and isolation were crushing. Clara had always prided herself on being admired, but now she was the subject of whispers and judgment. Professionally, the fallout was just as swift. Clara's job, which she had once claimed was the cornerstone of her ambitions, became a source of dread. Jacob's divorce attorney, Marcus, had expertly uncovered her misuse of company resources during her affair. Expenses for her business trip with Ethan had been charged to the company card, and when confronted, she couldn't produce a credible defense. Within weeks of her return, Clara was called into a meeting with her supervisor. The termination notice was swift and unceremonious. "We can't overlook this level of dishonesty," her boss said firmly. "Your actions have jeopardized the company's integrity." Without a steady income, Clara struggled to maintain the lifestyle she once flaunted. The savings she had hoped to use for her future were now securely in Jacob's hands, leaving her scrambling to cover her basic expenses. Miami, once a dreamy escape with Ethan, now felt like a bitter memory of a reckless choice. Ethan, too, proved to be an unreliable partner. Their romantic connection fizzled under the weight of her crumbling life. When the whispers of her affair reached him, he distanced himself, reluctant to be tied to the scandal. One evening, after weeks of unreturned calls and texts, Clara finally realized she was truly alone. Her world, once carefully constructed around her ambitions and desires, now lay in ruins. The friends, reputation, and financial security she had taken for granted were gone. Clara was left with nothing but the bitter realization that her actions had not only cost her marriage but every meaningful part of her life. In the quiet of her small, rented apartment, Clara stared at the remnants of her belongings. Regret washed over her as she replayed the choices that led her here. But no amount of reflection could undo the damage. She had gambled everything and lost. For Jacob, the months following the confrontation were not easy, but they were transformative. At first, he grappled with the emotional aftermath of betrayal. Nights spent wrestling with questions that had no satisfying answers and mornings where the emptiness of his once shared home weighed heavily on him. But slowly, he began to see the end of his marriage not as a loss but as an opportunity to rebuild. Jacob threw himself into his career with a renewed sense of purpose. The focus that had once been clouded by the stress of his failing marriage became razor-sharp. He took on new projects, earned accolades from his colleagues, and even landed a promotion. Each success was a reminder of his own resilience, proof that he could thrive on his own terms. Beyond work, Jacob leaned on his friends more than ever. The same people who had supported him during the tumultuous weeks of uncovering Clara's infidelity became his anchors. Weekly game nights and impromptu dinners became a regular part of his routine, filling his days with laughter and camaraderie. Jacob realized how much he had neglected these relationships while trying to salvage his marriage, and he vowed never to take them for granted again. As time passed, Jacob found himself reconnecting with parts of himself he had forgotten. He took up running, finding peace in the rhythmic pounding of his feet on the trails. He enrolled in a photography class, rediscovering the joy of capturing life's small, beautiful moments. Each step forward was a reminder that his life was his own to shape. A year after his divorce, Jacob met someone who would change his life. Her name was Lily, a graphic designer with a warm smile and an infectious laugh. They met at a mutual friends gathering, and their connection was immediate. Unlike his relationship with Clara, which had been built on grand ambitions and shared plans, his bond with Lily was rooted in authenticity. They spent hours talking about their lives, their passions, and their dreams, finding comfort and excitement in each other's company. With Lily by his side, Jacob felt a lightness he hadn't known in years. His heart, once weighed down by betrayal, was open again. For the first time in a long time, Jacob looked forward to the future, not as a continuation of what had been lost, but as a new beginning. Jacob had not only survived the storm but emerged stronger, happier, and more himself than ever before. As Jacob stood on the balcony of his new home, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought him here. What had once felt like an unbearable betrayal had turned into the catalyst for a new chapter in his life. The scars of the past were still there, but they no longer defined him. Instead, they served as a reminder of his strength and resilience. Betrayal had taught Jacob lessons he never expected to learn. How to let go of what no longer served him, how to prioritize his own happiness, and how to trust himself again. He realized that the end of his marriage wasn't the end of his story. It was the beginning of a better one. In losing Clara, he had found himself. Jacob's life now was a reflection of his growth. His career was thriving, his friendship stronger than ever, and his relationship with Lily was built on honesty and mutual respect. He no longer dwelled on what could have been but instead focused on what could be. The betrayal that once consumed him was now just a footnote in a story of resilience, renewal, and hope. And so, Jacob's story serves as a reminder to us all. Even in the darkest moments, there is a path forward. Sometimes, life's biggest heartbreaks can lead to its greatest transformations. Thank you for watching and joining me on this journey. If you love Jacob's story of redemption and want to hear more jaw-dropping tales of betrayal, revenge, and resilience, make sure to subscribe to Unheard Stories. Let me know in the comments, what would you have done in Jacob's shoes? And where are you tuning in from? Let's keep the conversation going. See you in the next story.